particularly the ones who are doing it for the first time, just assume that they come up with that idea and they build a prototype and they begin building some business around it. And then the first thing they do is they just begin talking to VCs, and they come to us and say, hey, can you introduce me to 10 VCs? And so a lot of what we're trying to do here is to build what we call capital fitness, which is this kind of not only the understanding of the investment journey, but giving lots of information so that the entrepreneurs can actually own that part of the journey. So they know how to work with investors, how to talk to them, but also, while you know what's in your own head, you need to get inside the head of the investor. What is going to trigger that yes? Because as you know, biologically, we're wired to say no a lot. And very often you have to overcome this tremendous amount of energy to kind of overcome that hurdle to get truly to someone to say yes. Because human beings really are are highly loss averse versus gain optimizers. And so what we teach the entrepreneurs is really how to get over that bump, how to kind of articulate what they're doing in a way that eventually it will seem obvious and inevitable what they're doing, and kind of trigger that conversation with the investor. So we're going to talk to 3 very experienced investors who kind of run the whole gamut from being operators and entrepreneurs themselves to people who have been, deep in the trenches of the investing. So you can kind of get inside their head. But we also structure this particular program to be a conversation and a dialogue. So while we'll kind of set some context up front so you can learn a little bit about their backgrounds in the journey and a little bit about their fund, we then want to open it up to questions. So what I will ask you is, when you do have a question, raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Stand up, say very, very briefly who you are and kind of what you represent, but most importantly, ask a question. We get so often people get up and for the first 3 minutes, they give us a background, a history of the world before they kind of get to the question. So if you can get to your question immediately, we'll have a lot more time for asking questions. And then we will leave time at the end for a bit of networking, so you can actually come up, talk with them, get to know them a little better, and maybe even exchange some information. So before we kick it off, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're coming in and out, please use the back doors rather than the front doors, just so we don't interrupt the flow of the conversation. That's 1. 2, what we'd like to mention, how many of you are here for the very, very first time? That is so exciting. Deb, take a note of that. We do these programs specifically to encourage new people to get to know what we do here at the Office of Innovation and at UCSD in general, around trying to encourage more entrepreneurship and innovation here. But we want to invite you in. And while this may be one program that you're here to see, understand that we do so much. And you'll hear us a few times kind of mention our website, where we hope that all things innovation sit, which is innovation.ucsd.edu. Should be relatively easy to do. At the end of the conversation too today, I'll probably forget, but there is a QR code here. We love to have feedback on the kinds of things we're doing. Not only on kind of what you found valuable or not valuable about these conversations, but if you want to see more types of these things, feel free to tell us what's in your head and kind of how we can serve, because we are here to serve you. The Office of Innovation and Commercialization was actually established to be a service provider to the campus and the community. We are here to provide an entrepreneurial experience to anyone on the campus and the community who actually wants to experience entrepreneurship. We are also here to support entrepreneurs, people who have ideas and want to turn those ideas into businesses. We are here to act like a concierge, either directly kind of helping them or point them to the right resources. And the architectural map of this looks like almost like a highway system, where there's a series of on-ramps and off-ramps for your journey, and there's no one way to do it. So it's not like we tell you, oh, if you're at this stage, you must be here or there. We give you lots of options, and we let you explore those options that are, 1, easiest for you to navigate and take a hold of, 2, are most relevant for you, and 3, things that just feel right for you, that you have the chemistry with the people or with the program. And we encourage you to try lots of things, because really what we're trying to engineer here at UCSD is a lot of serendipity, not just process. We want to encourage these random collisions that you have. And the whole building that we have here, the Design and Innovation Building, was really designed for that purpose, which is why so many of these spaces are highly configurable. These doors open up and close on the first floor where our basement incubator is. When people come in, those floors are those spaces are highly configurable. We work very collaboratively with every part of campus, and tonight you're going to hear specifically about a new fund that's tied to the engineering and medtech accelerator program here, and you're going to learn a little bit more. And we love to work very, very closely with them. So think of us as partners in your journey, as opposed to just people where you have to come to us. We are concierge. We're curators of the experience for that. So keep that in mind. Always feel free to ask questions either during this event or even afterwards. Email us if you're looking for something or you need advice on something. We are here to serve you for what we're doing. So with that said, also the restrooms are out there. There's water fountains and stuff. And if there's nothing immediate that we've got to take care of, I'd like to introduce just a few people before we introduce our colleagues, people who are here tonight. I'd like to introduce Eric Otterson, a good friend of ours who's with Silicon Valley Bank. He's supported a lot of our innovation efforts in the community and here at UCSD in the past. We've got Deb Bronson-Culp, who is actually the chair of our investment group within the Chancellor's Innovation and Entrepreneurship Council, as well as being a trustee of the university. Marie Christensen from IGE in the School of Engineering. Mwako, who's here actually with our Office of Research and Innovation. Hopefully I didn't miss anyone. If I did, I'll try to catch you towards the tail end. But why don't we get started for what we're doing? So it's really my pleasure tonight to introduce you to hopefully 3 new VCs that you may not know and you haven't gotten to spend time with, because that's a great way to actually start these conversations and get to know them a little better. They represent very different sets of experience, so you're going to hear about that. So it's not a one-size-fits-all model. But they also happen to be friends and colleagues and ways of doing these things. But rather than me tell you about their backgrounds and stuff, I'm going to let them tell you kind of in their own words, not only kind of who they are and kind of where they come from, but this journey about how they came to becoming an investor. And then we'll kind of dig deeper in the second part of it in terms of actually how the investments and how they work with entrepreneurs. So just because he's on my left, I'll introduce you to Jon. And Jon can get started.
Thank you for having me. Good to see the room so full. Otterson, thanks for being here. Jon Bassett, I run an early stage venture fund called NextGen Venture Partners. Very tactically, we invest in generalist tech at the earliest stages, typically writing $250,000 to $2 million checks, trying to get 10% ownership. We typically lead. All the talk today is AI, at least in the technology and software world. If anybody checked the public markets today, it's a bloodbath out there, presumably because AI is eating the software world. I have some differing thoughts on that, which we can get into. But by day, I run NextGen. A handful of years ago, we actually took an investment from a large wealth management platform into our management company. So I sit in an interesting role where I also oversee the private direct investments for a $180 billion wealth management platform. And they're expressly looking for deals that AI is not going to disrupt. So they're the 3rd largest owner in an MLB franchise. We just invested in a 15 Wingstop rollout on the East Coast. So there's a belief that sports teams, that fast food, some of these things will not be disrupted by AI, at least not in very obvious ways. So I think I have an interesting purview where early stage tech, heavy AI, late stage, things that won't be disrupted by AI. And I think I'll pause there and happy to share kind of my story into venture after you hear from the rest of these guys.
Hey everyone, my name is Garrett Smith. I'm really glad to be here. I'm the managing partner for ReefHaven Ventures, which is this new exciting venture fund we're going to talk about more. Partnered with UC San Diego, the MedTech Accelerator, and some other groups on campus. Before I get into that, I'll just tell you a little bit more about myself. So I am a UCSD alum, and I started my career here about 19 years ago doing my PhD in bioengineering. And I really came here because I wanted to find out, how do I start a company? I knew I was interested in science, but I had no idea how to find the right science to work on to start a company. So a lot of what I learned, which I can unpack later, was at UCSD of how do you find the right projects to work on? How do you get the right type of mentorship? How do you go about de-risking a business to actually think that it's worthwhile starting instead of going and getting a job elsewhere or doing something different with your life. So from there, I finished my PhD in bioengineering. I started a medical device startup. Took that from inception all the way through FDA clearance. So I have experience operating and running medical device companies. I then started a second medical device company that was spun out of the Stanford Biodesign program, where I was a fellow. That was a medical device company in ophthalmology, treating dry eye disease, and that was actually acquired by Allergan. And one of the things that really excites me about medtech is that it's really about the patient impact. So yes, the total proceeds was about 270 million for that company and payout to investors and shareholders, but tens of thousands of patients received this device, were treated, and I think that's really our North Star for doing what we're doing is the impact on people. So that was about a decade or so ago, and then I moved into the venture world. So I joined a corporate venture capital group called Medion Bio. It's a publicly traded medical device company, and I was responsible for $50 million venture arm, so leading seed and Series A deals in digital health and medtech startups. So learned a lot about venture investing there. Then I moved over to Johnson & Johnson because I realized, I learned how to operate companies and a little bit how to invest in companies, but how are companies actually bought, right? And how does a large company actually assess a small one for a certain type of deal? So I figured J&J is probably a good place to do that. And I was on our business development biopharma team, so I've also worked on the biopharma side as well, partnerships, licenses, et cetera. And then I've also done a number of angel investments over my career, about 9 different medtech investments. One is actually in the room tonight. Great to see you, Steve. And so yeah, just been very aware of the investment world and what's going on and tracking that. So I'll go ahead and pause and let Nick introduce himself.
Hi, Nick Mourlas. I'm an engineer by training, so undergrad in mechanical, graduate degree in electrical, and my journey started with working in industry after my undergraduate degree, thinking it's going to be a long life, and like, how do I want to spend my life's energies? And I thought that healthcare is a great way to change the course of people's lives, either making their quality of life better or extending their lives. And at the same time, I got exposed to the venture capital model, where people with great ideas can get together with people with a checkbook and then do great things together. And so this was, I'm dating myself, this is the early 90s. And MEMS, microsystem fabrication development, was getting kind of the same buzz as AI, although AI is so, I don't know, such a groundswell of change. Maybe not quite that, but really, really a lot of momentum behind it. I thought I'd go back to graduate school, get my electrical engineering degree to complement my mechanical engineering degree, and spin a med tech sensor type startup out of that. On the back end of my PhD, I did the same fellowship that Garrett did at Stanford, and from that experience, spun some technology out into an electrophysiology company. So ran that for 6 years, 3 rounds of financing, all the way through early commercialization, and then Medtronic bought us. And that was my first foray in entrepreneurship. We had a great team, got really lucky in terms of timing. Like, a lot of things need to come together to be successful. And so really enjoyed that ride, difficult, but enjoyed that ride, and wanted to do it again. And so subsequent to that, I did another 3 startups, one in of orthopedics, another in radiation oncology, clinical decision support that has an AI core to it, and then finally a 4th company, which was another orthopedics company. And those all went from concept through to early commercialization and then exit. First with Integral Life Sciences, the second with Turning Point Health Systems, and the final one with Johnson & Johnson. I joined J&J in 2016 on their new ventures group, where I was looking for early stage technologies to graft into our R&D pipeline, so either doing R&D collaborations or equity investments. And the real thinking is get close to the technology as it's emerging, help de-risk it, and then onboard it at the right time. Did that for 6 years, and then in 2022, came down to San Diego to be the site head for JLab San Diego. It's an incubator. It's J&J's flagship incubator at the Torrey Pines facility. And for me, I felt like the job description was the same. It was find early stage companies to partner with via R&D collaboration or equity investment. Only I had the additional joy of being, getting out in the community and talking to people more, and also running a 40,000 square foot incubator. So my job was to keep that filled with exciting technologies that would map to J&J's strategy at any one time. And then just a handful of months ago, I was talking to Garrett about ReefHaven Ventures and this exciting thing that he's getting off the ground, and conversations became more frequent, and then I joined with him on this adventure. So that's me.
So, a question for you. When did the kind of concept for ReefHaven come up? Was it just natural extension, or was it opportunistic in some ways? Or was it very strategic for you that this is my kind of path?
Yeah, so I think throughout my career, the first question was, how I said, like, how do I find an idea? How do I build a company? Then the second question was really, how do I invest in the right companies? And the third question is, how do those companies that I invest in, how are they actually bought? So what I feel like I've learned along the way through failures and successes is this process of really kind of where I want to play, and it's being able to see things early, being able to spot the winners early, being able to invest, and then kind of shepherd those opportunities into partnerships. So I really like to play in that space. And as an investor, both corporate venture investor and angel investor, that's what I love to do. That's where I love to be. And it made sense in the last 6 months based on conversations that UCSD had already been having for a while to explore creation of a venture fund. And obviously there's a lot of venture activity on campus already, but more of a formal partnership between ReefHaven Ventures and the MedTech Accelerator at UCSD. So it just made sense that like this was the right time. We only started about 4 months ago to actually launch this venture fund. So in that sense, it was opportunistic based on this real big need that early innovators need capital early, but we also need operating support, right, for those companies. People that haven't done it before or even have done it before, you still need those connections and that network. So to answer your question, I think it was both a combination of knowing like the area that I want to play, which is really this continuum and building, investing, and selling companies, and then some conversations that were happening on campus here that were really exciting. And the last thing I wanted to say is ReefHaven Ventures is an independent venture capital firm, so we are not a UCSD fund, but we are partnered, we are collaborating deeply across campuses. So not only engineering, but medicine, business, biological sciences, obviously OIC, very close partnership.
And 4 months to now, you are ready to rock, right?
We're ready to rock. We are ready to rock. We're rocking. We've already done our first close on our fund, which a lot of times that can take a year, and Nick and I pulled it off in 4 or 5 months or so. We've also made our first investment in a UC San Diego MedTech Accelerator company, actually, that we can talk about more later. So definitely cooking.
And I think you're going to have some people here who are definitely going to want to talk to you about that.
Please.
John, from your side, what kinds of companies do you specifically look for in your thesis for what you do? Do you have a lane or a niche, or are you guys more of a generalist? What kind of stuff makes sense?
So we invest early, so idea formation stage up through a company with some modest amount of revenue. We are generalists by nature, generalist tech, so looking at probably very different things than these guys over here. I'm much less educated than both of them, as you heard, PhDs. But we tend to look at the earliest stages. We're often looking at we develop theses around certain markets, and we're often looking for kind of team market bets at the earliest stages. So I like to ask myself, have all the founders' prior experiences led them to this moment? And is there a real big enough tangible market, and who else is tackling this market? One thing I've been a bit frustrated with in this most recent market is, from a tech perspective, from an AI perspective, I think a lot of founders are starting companies to get rich and not starting companies to solve a problem or something broken in the world. I have no problem if you get rich while solving a problem, but I think starting a company to get rich is the wrong motivation. And when times get hard, when you're trying to motivate a team, when you're trying to attract talent, things tend to fall flat. So we spend a lot of time focused on what is the problem. A lot of times people come to market with a solution and not addressing a real problem. So I think I'm a little bit off script here, but generalist tech is what we look for, at least from the tech lens, and maybe different on the medical side. Over 70% of capital in 2025 went to AI native businesses. So I have never seen, in the 16 years I've been doing this, so much air taken out of the room by one trend and one movement. Certainly, Mark Andreessen's famous quote of "software is eating the world." Software's obviously been a big movement for a long time. SaaS, offering it as subscription instead of legacy licenses. But I have not seen a technology suck as much air out of the room from a funding point of view. And these things are cyclical. It will change. It will shift. But we're seeing a lot of challenge with all of our companies that were started that were non-native AI businesses, struggling to grow as fast as the AI companies, struggling to raise follow-on financing because they're not AI first. And so it is a trend that is here. And again, this stuff is cyclical. The tide will go out at some point on this, I think. But for right now, it's sort of all things AI.
So why don't we follow on that? Obviously, the big elephant in the room is AI and how it's kind of touching everything. So you may say, like you said, we haven't seen something kind of consume so much, as you said, the oxygen in the room. But this is not just a new technology. This is an entire paradigm, if that's what you want to call it, a wave of what's happening that will literally touch every business and everything we do in some ways. So are you shifting either the thesis or are you still kind of looking for the same companies? Are you finding that in your investment strategy, you guys are finding any kind of a bias towards looking for companies that are incorporating AI in some way?
Yeah, I mean, AI is totally sucking the oxygen out of the room. I think, just to put it in perspective for you all, we just looked at a growth stage company that has gone from $0 in revenue and being incorporated in 2024 to $250 million in annual recurring revenue in 2026. Never before in my career, and I haven't seen every company, but I have not seen a company go from 0 to 250 million in revenue in 2 years. Now, it's not the same moats as traditional software, which was, multi-year enterprise licenses based on seat counts. Like, some of the challenges that we're seeing here are switching costs are low. If you're not getting your data hook, in, it's easy to switch providers. A lot of these are month-to-month agreements, so you get huge increases in subscriptions, and then the next month you're down materially month over month. But it just changed the paradigm. I mean, we used to have a saying that if you could triple, double revenue, that was best in class. If you go from 1 to 3, 3 to 9, 9 to 18, 18 to 36, that was best in breed. If you're doing that today in a non-native AI business, you're not getting a lot of attention from the market. So we've had to shift our models to think about, like, what is best in class growth? What are best in class margins? Is it okay to run at a big material loss if you're piggybacking on a model like, Claude or OpenAI? And your costs of goods are upside down for now. Can you get to a point of scale that your margins can come back in your favor? The last couple of deals we have done, we did a sort of up and coming chip design company that is doing system on wafer. So they're trying to get the entire system down onto the wafer scale, which has material cost savings in energy transfer and heat transfer and things like that. Right now, we're deep in diligence on a fintech solution that uses AI for non-bank financial institutions and lenders to sort of pre-qualify and determine in qualification, if a company's a fit or not, or why something's been kicked out of the process. We're seeing it a lot in healthcare. AI use cases. We have a company here in San Diego called Tesserae that's trying to help with drug discovery and development using AI as a solution. So that's a handful of things we are seeing, but the paradigm is totally shifted. What is good growth? What is good margins? What is good scale? We think a lot about distribution. Like, do you have defensible distribution today? Do you have an unfair go-to-market advantage? So those are just some of the things that we're thinking about on these early stage deals today. I'd be curious what you guys are seeing on the medical side.
So I see AI in medical technologies as an unbelievable capability, but a capability nonetheless, right? At the end of the day, whatever your system is, for engineers kind of draw a boundary around it, right? Like what's the outcome that really is impactful for patients? And then AI becomes interesting as the method to get there. I think Garrett had mentioned we had our first close. We invested in a UCSD company. That company happens to have AI as a big component of how it works. But that wasn't what made it exciting. What made it exciting is how it changes the patient experience and the clinician experience, and enhances workflow in the OR, has the opportunity to give more precision to the surgeon as they're placing certain hardware, and then decreases the total amount of ionizing radiation that the patient gets. And this is all enabled by AI. Wouldn't have a company or a device kind of without it. And so absolutely, there are more companies starting in med tech that have that core AI engine to it. And at the end of the day, it's about patient outcomes.
Did you want to wait?
Yeah, so I'll just add to that. So to the last three companies that we've either invested in out of the fund, which is the one company that Nick just mentioned, the two others that I personally invested in the last year or so. The other two, one was a pure AI play, so it was an ANI enabling software. And this one was interesting because it was enterprise software for R&D groups from major companies like Medtronic, or these large groups that have built multi-billion-dollar budgets for R&D. Well, how do you decide how to prioritize different areas, and specifically what unmet clinical areas do you focus on? So it's not just about the science and the technology, which you'll hear that a lot from probably all of us up here, but it's also how do you understand like the space around whatever that technology is. So that company that we invested called Sluice AI, that's already profitable, and that's not that surprising being an AI company, but it just moves really quick and it's a different model. The other company that I invested in personally is called Dragon Vascular, and it's a better retrieval device for stroke. So no AI whatsoever. It's just it's more than a better mousetrap, but it is a better, quicker way to remove a clot for a person that's having a stroke. So I'm comparing those two because they're very different, right? Technologies, very different business models, but they both solve really big problems.
So we've been talking a little bit about the companies, the technologies, the investment, but all of that is underpinned by the people themselves. Very often when we invest in startup companies, we make these faith-based investments at the earliest stage. We have a little bit of data, but we're really betting on the team can actually pull this off and that the idea is defensible over at least until we get our money back with the multiple. So getting to kind of the more people side of things, have you formed any kind of a rubric or kind of a sniff test on what kind of entrepreneurs you're looking for? Are there any kind of hard sets, or is it just you kind of know it when you see it?
Here goes. I'll give you a couple examples, but I think I really like to see founder market fit. So not just what are you doing and why are you doing it, but have prior life experiences led you to this outcome, right? Something is broken and there's a burning desire inside of you to fix it because of life experiences you have had. There's some things I like to see that aren't prereqs, but I find that we have a lot of success with founders who have worked in service industries in a prior life. I tend to like backing immigrant founders because there's, for whatever reason, like more of a hunger and drive. People that have worked in sales roles. We have a killer founder who used to sell like Cutco knives door to door, right? And so I think it's just, those are some tactical things, but two examples of this like founder market fit to bring it to life. The system on wafer business called Density AI. The team built the Tesla Dojo supercomputer, which so far is the only like scaled model of system on wafer that's really worked. And so when they left, they wanted to bring that technology to a bunch of different industries. they are sort of an N of one. There may be a team in China that we don't know about. There may be a team elsewhere in the world doing it, but it's a very small set of people that have delivered this at scale. And they realize the problem firsthand and the economies of scale you can gain if you can pull this off. They're also one of 4 companies that have tape out capacity at TSMC, which is an unfair advantage because you got to get this stuff made. So that's sort of everything they had done in their prior experiences, from Texas Instruments to IBM to Apple, mem work and Apple low power battery stuff had sort of brought them to this moment. The other example is a early stage company called IP Copilot. They build these sort of listening AI that sits across systems, Slack, Teams, Outlook, Gmail, and they will prompt you for any potentially patentable new ideas that your organization comes up with. The founder has 600 patents to his name at Capital One. Had spent time at Qualcomm prior, which I think they're really like a patent company. We can debate if that's true or not, but they have a very serious patent portfolio. And so he left and said, look, I've seen it at Qualcomm. I've done it at Capital One. Everybody else needs a solution. I'm going to go build it. So that's kind of 2 examples of what I would call founder market fit to bring it to life a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of different types of founders out there, right? Different personality types, different backgrounds, different technical skill sets. I think the most successful founders that I've invested in, ultimately, they will run through a wall to get whatever is needed to be done. And I've seen that time and time again. And oftentimes it comes from those people that may have had a technical background and they may be more focused on the science or the data. But in reality, you have to have the practical experience of when to know, like, how do execution is a whole nother topic, right? But you have to know how to execute to be successful in this business. So to the extent that you can predict or have some other patterns that you can look for in a founder that's done it before, to know that they will continue to hitting that brick wall and eventually make it through, I think that's a really important trait. Also difficult to test for, though, without knowing them or working with them before.
Just the last thing that I think came up a little bit, but I'll double underline it, which is, has the entrepreneur faced adversity in their life before? Have they overcome it? Have they come out on the other side with newfound knowledge and without their hope and entrepreneurial spirit kind of impacted? Are they still ready to go take on the next challenge? So a history of resilience and having run through walls is something that's really important.
Maybe just a quick pet peeve. Not much of the world is black and white, and this isn't either, but it really bothers me when I get on a call. And these are very early stage companies, people with ideas, and they say, when I raise money, I'm going to. And for me, it's like, if you have this burning desire inside, you should already be doing, not waiting for capital to do. Everyone's economic situation is different. There may be extraneous circumstances where you really can't get going without a little bit of a cash infusion. But outside of that, when I get money, I'm going to, or I haven't launched a website because it's not perfect. Like, whatever you launch is not going to be perfect. You're not going to find perfect product market fit. So my bias is always get stuff in the market and iterate quickly. And so a big pet peeve for me is like, once we raise the money, we're going to go do this. And there's very few businesses where you have to raise a bunch of capital, at least on the tech and software side, to get going. It may be different on this side, but like, start showing some traction. Don't wait for the money to then go do stuff.
2 things I would add. One is looking for, I love entrepreneurs who are more obsessed with what they don't know than what they do know. And 2 is they've got to be darn good storytellers. Every entrepreneur is a science fiction writer, and they've got to convince us that this future is very feasible and doable, and that, as I said, eventually, if they can make it feel obvious and inevitable, they've kind of got us. And so storytelling is really something good, because sales, every CEO, every founder is first and foremost a salesperson. You're selling your team, you're selling the market, you're selling your investors, and you're doing it over and over again with your vision. So invest in some good classes to do that, in addition to all these other ones that you're doing as well. Go ahead.
Can I just add that?
Yeah.
One of the pieces of advice that I give to every first-time founder, highlighting something that you said, is you're not just selling a medical product, you're also selling a financial product. And so you really need to understand not only the competitive landscape for your medical device, but the competitive landscape for the other early stage companies that are going out there, and to be able to position yourself well. And I think that that's less exciting to technical founders, having been one myself, but it's a necessary set of skills that you need to learn, and you need to be able to take it on enthusiastically.
Eric. So, oh no, he said anytime. Yeah. He said anytime you can ask questions, yeah.
He's an entrepreneur. He just stepped in.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to encourage you. Y'all can ask questions, all right? Just saying. Yeah. Eric Otterson, Silicon Valley Bank, and my question is, as you're looking at opportunities and the entrepreneur is presenting to you, how do you look at, for example, early stage, what they're planning to do in the next 18 months as compared to what they plan to do in the next, in your life science case, 5 years, and in the tech, 3 years? How important do you weigh those two, and how do you think about them as the entrepreneur is telling their story?
Who wants to go first?
Go ahead.
So they need to understand that whole journey, but I'm definitely focused on what is the next step, and is that going to wring a lot of risk out of the journey. But they also need to know what the other points are where there are risks being wrung out, and then thus value inflections. So having a sophisticated view of not only these are the milestones that I'm going to hit, but here's my funding strategy around how investors at every stage are going to do well. And so I'm going to also come back to that first 18 months already in your mind. You need to have, one needs to have crystallized, this is the unmet clinical need, and this is how we are going to shift it in a meaningful way. And if you have something that is a process improvement purely, or something that is a nice to have that physicians like but won't change a clinical outcome, those can be fine businesses to invest in, and many people have done well with that. But for ReefHaven, we're really looking for things that are impactful to patients, and then if you can do that, then that value creation, just flows from there.
Yeah, I can add to that too with a story being an entrepreneur and kind of what can move the needle. In this case, it was for a venture capital firm to get institutional money in the Bay Area. So you may have your idea, you may have your business plan, you have a prototype, maybe something gaining early revenue, but what really will move the needle for someone to write not just the $100,000 check, but maybe the $2 million or the $5 million check? So that's a critical thing to be asking yourself and asking other stakeholders to figure that out. And what I would encourage people to do, especially if you're from scientific or technical training, is really think outside the box. It may not be, in this case, we had developed a device to treat dry eye disease that would stimulate the tear gland. So you have a tear gland, we figured out that it's not being stimulated. So if it was stimulated, then it could produce natural tears. Everyone was telling us, well, you need to go out and you need to raise all this money and you need to run clinical studies. But what we did is we figured out a way that we could test that basically on ourselves with a TENS device and show like a very early proof of concept with some data, got people with dry eye to use it to show, tearing and like some real evidence. Now, that's not the type of evidence that would be published in a journal, but it was enough of the type of evidence and data that moved the needle for that investor. So I think just practically speaking, like think outside the box, or when you come to us as entrepreneurs, show us, how much value you can create with an early data point. Ideally, you've already created it, and show us what's needed in order to get to that next round to de-risk the company further.
Yeah, I think when we invest in a business, we typically invest for 18 to 24 months of runway for that business. So you have a $100,000 a month burn rate or capital spend plan. You would raise $1.8 to $2.4 million if you weren't going to ramp up burn and didn't expect revenue, for example. Maybe answering Eric's question a little different way, I think not enough entrepreneurs ask their investors what is expected of them to get to the next level. And one of two things is going to happen. Either when we write an initial check, there's certain things we want to see in order to put more money into your business, right? And there's some businesses going in, we know we're probably only going to write one check. And as an entrepreneur, the onus kind of falls on you to have that conversation with your investors of, hey, what do I need to show to unlock more capital from you, John? Well, if you're not going to write me another check, what do you think we collectively need to show the market in order to raise the next round of financing? And often, I think fundraising is not a point in time thing. It should be a sort of evergreen, ongoing thing. And I think the best founders are constantly updating a set of prospective investors on the things they are doing, a monthly update, a quarterly update. And nothing makes me more happy than like under promising and over delivering. Like if you send a Q4 update and you say, by the second half of next year, we're gonna do X, Y, and Z, and then you've done that plus A, B, and C, you've done 100% more than you said you were. Those are the kind of signals that get me really excited, because every interaction with you is like a dot on a plot chart, right? And we want to see is like an aggressively upward trend line. And we want to jump in before it breaks out. But if you're not updating us, we don't have the signal. And if it's flat or down, it's not a positive signal. So, maybe a different way of thinking about answering your questions, but I think asking your stakeholders what they expect to see in order to raise more financing. And the second piece, some businesses just require a lot of cash, but I see too many founders trying to hit milestones to unlock more funding, which may apply more in clinical trials or otherwise. But some of the best business we've invested in is raised once or twice and never again, because they're profitable, because they get acquired. And so it's a dangerous game when founders start building a business to raise venture capital versus raising a venture capital to build their business. It's a subtle nuance, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. So I think keep that in mind and try to build for the end customer and the problem you're trying to solve.
And since Eric kicked it off, I will certainly open it up to others to ask questions. And you'll find, I'll come right back to you, Maya.
Hi, Jude Paganelli, serial entrepreneur. We talked about founders. The room seems to be full of founders and innovators. Does it matter to the three of you if they convince you and want to run the company to the end, or if they see themselves as a player in that company, but not the person who's going to run the whole thing?
And by the way, just quick show of hands, how many of you are founders? So you're right, there are a lot of founders. How many are on kind of the tech side of things, and how many would consider yourselves life sciences or health tech? Health tech? Tech? Consumer and not either of them? There you go. Very good.
So that question definitely comes up a lot. There's a deal we're looking at right now fairly seriously, not with anybody in this room, but where we think that the founder can execute on the next set of milestones for 18 months, but can they really do it for the next round? And then there's some question mark about, can they really raise the $5 million that's needed, for the next round to be successful? So I don't think there's a really easy way to make a decision on that, because we like the founder. We believe they can do what they say they're going to do. But in terms of how do you make a full decision on whether or not to invest in that situation or not, it can be challenging. What we've also done before is bring in, either we sit on the board, right, or bring in highly skilled people that can add to that team, and that's another kind of way to get around it.
This may be a dividing line in our sort of business models, but I come from like an old school world of venture capital. I sort of apprenticed under an eccentric guy named Tim Draper, who bought all the DOJ Bitcoin. And I once sat at a meeting where a founder walked in, and the company is called Smart Frog, and Tim just started ribbiting at the founder when he walked in the room. No hello, just ribbit. And we ended up not doing the deal, but we ended up hiring that guy in the firm years later. So Tim's an eccentric dude, but I sort of believe in the stuff we're doing because it's so early and it's so team market bet. If you lose the founder, you lose the business. We have had companies that have outgrown the founder, but we found other roles for them in the company. And I think when you lose the founder, which we have in some instances, I can't think of an instance where we've had a great economic outcome where we've lost the founder totally from the business. Often the business outgrows the founder. And in the best instances, the founder realizes it around the same time that investors on the board realize it. We make a decision together. We tend to have the CEO help interview possible replacement candidates. We tend to start with them as like a chairman of a board or a COO and move into a CEO role over time. But I think if you lose the founder, you lose the business, which may be different from other sectors or focus areas where it's more about the technology, but the founder's still, very important.
Absolutely. The founder has an energy and a knowledge about the history of the product or the development effort that's really critical. And if you can, I think you said it well, the board and the founder themselves realize that it's time to make a change, that can go well. If they see it at a different time, it can be more challenging. One of, like, actually the first company that I ran, as I was raising money, I was in my Series B. I had a venture capital firm that said, hey, we want to write a check, but if we do, we have to bring our CEO in because you haven't taken a company across the goal line before. And I told them, I said, hey, I'd love to have your person come in as soon as I can't see the next 18 months ahead and how I'm going to be very impactful for the company and the business. And so they chose not to invest in that company, but we parted on good terms because we were both very clear about things. And then they recruited me into my next CEO role because I had become a qualified CEO because my last company I took across the goal line.
Nice.
So
That is really good.
So my question is more towards medtech, and I'd be curious where you guys see white spaces or how you guys look at new opportunities that are coming down the line. Is it for the biggest populations that need care? Is it for new patentable devices? I'd be curious either what you're excited about or just how you look at opportunities down the line.
So I always go back to the unmet need, and you can really break that into two things: the clinical need and the market need. At least that's how we look at it. So you really have to have both of those to have a successful business in medtech. And I can't emphasize enough how often one or both of those needs are completely off, especially if it's more of a technology-driven solution or more of these AI, whatever, everything is AI kind of thing. We can go for the world, but you need to focus on the right market and the right clinical need. So Nick and I both did the biodesign fellowship at Stanford. Very much focuses on vetting that unmet need and spending a lot of time talking with patients, talking with your customers, talking with your key stakeholders. And so we'd like to see that a CEO or founder has done that level of due diligence, that they can tell us exactly who that patient population is. They can tell us, the market numbers, not just what they get off ChatGPT, but actually look at the, calculations based on what could happen, right, with their product. So there's a lot that goes into it. I will also say, as investors, we have a scorecard where we de-risk the entire company. It's fairly similar to like an investment memo, abbreviated investment memo that's done traditionally in VC. But we look at all the major factors that make up a business plan. And so we look for those. Many times when we hear companies pitching, aside from making sure there's a clinical need there and a large market opportunity, it's also making sure that there's no huge red X's that we cannot see a path forward with that company. But on the flip side, when we do that analysis, even in pitch meetings or for the first time, that's also what we're looking for, because you just see so many different pitches. You only have so much that you can review. And if there's something that stands out, this is a bit pessimistic, but this is just how investors look at it, right? And so it's so important when you do have these pitch meetings, especially for the first time, that you've thought through these elements and you can show us how you've de-risked it.
And if you have got a question, just kind of catch my eye so I can see that you want to ask questions.
All right.
That's
Oh,
right.
my name is Amin Barhoush, founder of XR Care. I'm just starting actually to raise money. And one of my worries, and I'm hoping you guys as a VC, you see actually more longer term, is, AI has been going from AI, Gen AI, agents, then agentic, almost like 6-8 months between each different one. And the money has been growing very, very, very fast. But at the same time, there is, everyone can see there is a big bubble. So my question is, by the time I raise money, maybe 6 months or 8 months from now, do you think the bubble would burst and I wouldn't even find any funding by then? Or you think that, there is no bubble and 6 months, 8 months, a year, 2 years from now, there will still be VC funding for, AI?
I'll let you guys take that. Crystal ball.
I think the capital markets are incredibly efficient. Things do get frothy, but dollars do tend to find the home that is working, the thing that is working in the startup space. There are parts of the AI market that certainly have to be in bubble from like PE metrics, forward-looking multiple metrics, margin metrics, but there are parts of the AI stack that are growing so incredibly quickly, I don't think they're necessarily in bubble territory yet. One thing I'm keeping my mind on, because we kind of sit across a bunch of different capital stacks, there's 3, potentially 4 banner IPOs that are going to happen this year. They're going to require so much capital to bolster the IPOs that I think it is going to draw capital away from other parts of the stack, venture capital, private equity. Like these dollars all come from similar spots. It's SpaceX, it's OpenAI, it's Anthropic, and you could maybe throw Stripe in there. And there could be a couple other sleepers that come to bear. But all of those are planning, SpaceX 100 billion plus, pushing for early inclusion in the index. And so I think we are entering like pretty frothy territory. I think you've seen the public market sell-offs today and yesterday, I alluded to earlier. But I guess all of this is to say, I would not build a business that you thought didn't have a chance if the AI bubble bursts, right? Like I think there's always going to be people looking for, there's a term called like a cockroach in the industry. It's people that just like keep fighting and keep innovating even though times are really tough. I wouldn't build for the capital markets and where you think they might be in 6 months. I'd build to solve the problem you're going to solve. And your cash spend plan may need to change based on the funding you're able to like piece together. But I wouldn't let where the markets are going dictate necessarily how quickly you raise or how much you raise. But I would try to be really thoughtful about what you're building and solve a problem. And I think capital markets are efficient. And if you're doing something worthwhile that is meaningful and making an impact, I would hope that the capital would find you. Does that make sense?
The other thing is that the difference between just good entrepreneurs and extraordinary entrepreneurs, the extraordinary entrepreneurs are solving really important problems, but their real core skill set is adaptability and agility, the ability to change and pivot when the markets begin changing. And in the analogy we use, we just say they're great surfers. They can feel the wave underneath them and know how to navigate different things. So if you're only just chasing something and you're behind the wave, you're never going to get a good ride on top of it.
I think the other thing to be mindful of is, valuations for many AI things are at such an extreme state. So as investors, valuation is such name of the game for us, right? So if we think the valuation is so incredibly high, well, then that means that the purchaser of that company, they have to be willing to pay that much higher of a price. And that's why I think there is a bubble that's happening right now. I think that for the medical and like healthcare field as a whole, you don't have as much of a elevated increase in valuations and elevated increase in buyouts as you see with tech. That's an obvious statement when I say that now. But I also think that's important for healthcare investors to know here in the audience that medtech is appealing for investors and also for buyers of medtech companies because the valuations are still at I would say an appropriate place. Now, if it's a Neuralink or something like that, that's a whole nother question. So.
Okay, so Deb Bronston-Culp, and you already mentioned my background. So it's really fun to talk about our successes, but as you all know and have implied or inferred, there's some really dark days as an investor and a founder. So what is that like? Tell us when you know you should pivot, either as a founder or as an investor, to help that founder identify it's time to pivot. And what is that process?
question, when it's time to pivot?
When it's time to pivot, what it's like to do that pivot. It's hard because you have to admit you're wrong. You have to come up with maybe a different idea, or it's, and you've gone through so much angst to get to that point.
Can I throw something in there that might help?
Everything's
Yeah, I can talk loudly enough. So
Talk loudly.
there's the before you're funded pivoting, right? So the first year.
So after, yeah.
Okay, so after. So you've gotten the money. You know when you need to pivot. If you've got your forecast that you've built and you're getting to this 18 months, and at month 9, you're at 40%, you've got to know why. You talk to your board, you talk to your investors. You have to know, am I going after, say, and sorry, I know software, so I don't know life sciences much, but I think it's the same things. You're looking for those metrics that create the value that you talked about. If you're not hitting those metrics, then when you have 9 months left, you have to decide, if I'm going to pivot, I need the 9 months to have time to, I need more, frankly, so I'm sorry, you have to fire your friends at 9 months. Because if you wait until you're down to 6 months, you're going to run out of money. So I would say at least 9 months before you're out of money.
That's a related and important and very difficult thing, for sure.
Some of the entrepreneurs here who I know, they're like,
No, there are times when you realize that you need to go in a different direction from really granular and continuous conversations with your customers. You know that you are not getting there, but you also know their need space enough and what they're looking for that you can pivot, find an adjacent market that maybe oftentimes isn't as large, but is going to be more sticky or more impactful. And it takes courage, but it also, the data is there because you are so engaged with your customers. I've been through the pivot process 3 times out of 4 companies. So yes, it's difficult, but if you want to survive, it's needed. And maybe to build on what you said, at 9 months out, you need to start battening down the hatches and turning the spigot off on money. Oftentimes, companies wait until it's 2 or 3 months out, and then it's, hey, can my investors throw us a lifeline? That's what you do, right? You have a bunch of capital. Can you just write us another check? And they wrote a check on a different thesis, and you're coming to them, not all the time, but sometimes folks will come, hey, can you build me a pier and we'll figure it out, as opposed to actually, here's a new destination where the dream is just as big and just as exciting. Would you like to go on this journey with me?
and that's where the storytelling stuff is really, really important. Tina Nova, one of our great life science entrepreneurs here in San Diego, started Genoptics. She got to the point where the original business model just was not working. Not only did she change it, but it was so radically different. Then she had to go to her board and then to the VCs and say, by the way, we're going to do an entirely new business model. They are so lucky that they listened to her and they went to that model because the exit was very successful for them. But it's a gut feeling, because for every one of those successful ones that we hear about that's done well, there are also a lot of smoking hole in the grounds that they pivoted. And there was a report called the Startup Genome Report that looked at 20 years of startup history, and it said, were there common elements between the most successful companies and things they did? And what they found is that the most successful companies pivoted 2 to 3 times. But those that pivoted fewer than that did not have the success rates, and those that pivoted more than that did not have the success rates. So you have to be very judicious in the feedback you're getting. So you can't just get dazzled by every new thing you're looking at. But at the same time, you can't be so hard and fast and think that the business is so linear that what you're doing is absolutely the right way. And it's alchemy. I mean, you just have to learn it.
I don't want to starve any of our companies, but real life experiment, kind of second half 22 through 23 was a little bit tougher time in the venture funding landscape world. And I'm amazed how many of our companies were down to very little cash and got really creative and have bounced back with like totally different business models. Because I think there is a truism that when you have capital, you will spend it. When people have a big bank balance, they say, oh, I could throw some money at LinkedIn. This is the tech side. You could throw money at LinkedIn ads, and maybe I'll throw some at SEO. And there's this new generative engine optimization thing I want to optimize for my product. And it's really easy to spend without seeing like clear ROI. And until the runway gets short and you say, wait a minute, like I'm not going to be able to make next month's payroll. Hopefully 9 months out, you realize that. There's been some incredible innovation that we have seen happen, in lean times when people's backs are against the wall. It's not fun, but it's when people get really creative, and I've seen like really interesting pivots take shape and find really successful businesses from there.
Yeah, I'll jump off that. I think the most amazing pivot I ever saw was an investment. It wasn't a pivotal study, but it was the study to show that if the product actually works, which is a clinical trial. And as those of you in the audience probably know, if you don't get good clinical trial data, that can often just kill the company right away, especially in biotech. This was a med tech product. But I think it was a 16-patient study, and the data came back like half of the implants caused an infection, like serious one. Nobody was seriously, everyone was okay, but it was just not the results you want, right? And so what the company did is they completely reworked the entire product, and it went from an implantable product, which is very invasive, and they figured out a way to make it almost like a wearable type of product. And then they ran the study. They actually convinced the investors that this was even a better way to do it. That wasn't an implant. They didn't have to charge all this money and go through all this regulatory. And then they reran the study with this device, and they knocked it out of the park with it. So that was the best pivot I've ever seen, but they don't always go that way.
Hi, my name's Noah Newig. I'm a UCSD student here, undergrad. And I was wondering how, this is especially prominent with healthcare AIs, how can you decipher whether or not an AI is actually capable of solving said problem with sufficient causality?
What do you guys do?
So I'm going to maybe narrow the entire solution space down a little bit. If you're looking at clinical solutions where it has already been solved previously, right? And so you have a massive data set that you can pull from. And in a typical way, and probably people that test data know this, like you'll train on 80% and then you'll test on 20%, right? And so if you're able to do that, then you kind of know the fidelity of your outcomes. Now, I think you can get in trouble where you don't have enough data in the space that you're trying to make predictions from, and you can get, I want to say cute, but there's ways to make that data look like it's enough to sample from, but there's certain areas where it's just so different than anything else you've seen. The system has to come back and say, we don't have a good answer, right? And so I think that not every solution can be generated from AI. You need real training data to go from, and the systems just need to say, yes, this is likely a valid outcome, or no, we can't make a prediction here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sanan. I finished my undergrad at UCSD in 2024, the nanoengineering department, also a graduate of the Stage 2 MedTech Accelerator. I grew tired of the amount of research you have to do, the manual testing, and repetitive, so I decided to get into a lab robotics company. And we built this company here in San Diego, raised an oversubscribed round, and started generating revenue just a few weeks ago. So I really appreciate what you guys are doing in the life sciences ecosystem. My question is for Garrett. You talk about this brick wall in front of you. So I'd like to hear about a time that you successfully broke for a brick wall after hitting your head countless times, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah, countless times is a good way to say it. I think for the company that I started actually out of my PhD research here at UCSD, I'll use that as an example. So first time CEO, it was a novel surface technology that you could put on an implant surface to reduce infection or inflammation. So I never raised money before, so I was able to raise the seed money okay from some friends and family. I think it's $200,000, $220,000. And it was getting that next round of funding, right? That was one of the most challenging things. And, I think it was logging 140 something plus, meetings to get that one lead investor. So I feel a lot of your pain in the audience if you're doing that right now, or even thinking about doing it. It's a slog, but I think in many ways, early stage fundraising is running through a brick wall. That's the financial element. And then I think another brick wall I had to run through, same company, was we thought that the inflection value point that really mattered was our FDA approval. Again, this is for a dental implant device. We had to run a clinical study, show that it works well. And it turns out that the buyers, the market, the strikers, the dental implant manufacturers, they didn't think it was that big a deal that we got this regulatory approval. They wanted to see sales, or they wanted to see a specific indication or a specific claim. So that was a huge learning experience of like making sure, as I've been emphasizing, that you're going after the right milestone. But I mean, we totally had to rally everybody around then doing a whole different study, moving the capital from the company into a completely different area, and really steering the direction of the ship in a different direction.
Yeah, hi. Patrick Schmidle, founder of Carry Health. Like his company, we went through the MedTech Accelerator a few years ago. And I just want to mention that we've, so we raised a seed round after that and then had to pivot. And so just want to mention that we've had the optimal number of pivots, 2 to 3. Just want to mention that. But it's been difficult. But my question is really, since we're here at UCSD, how do you view non-dilutive funding as part of the equation, especially early on? And has that changed with the AI wave?
I missed the last part of how it changed with the AI.
Has that changed at all, the importance of it? Because it used to be such a critical component of early stage life sciences companies and med device companies.
I almost think it's more critical now because early stage funding, at least for life sciences, is cut even further at the seed level. And so there's even more of a need for capital. We really like to see, and I think all investors would like to see, right, when there's non-dilutive financing or non-dilutive grants in the companies, it just goes a long way, especially with SBIRs and STTRs and the different mechanisms in place. In terms of how that relates to AI, I'm not sure if I can comment on that. I don't think I know about how AI has changed the part of non-dilutive grants that much. I don't know if anyone else, you have a comment on that?
Not on AI specifically, but we see it a lot in defense tech investments on the defense side. And I think the two things we look for, a lot of times people say, oh, we won this program of record for $660 million. But if you actually read the documentation, they're one of 17 approved vendors. There's no obligation to spend the $660 million. It's milestone based. So we like to understand exactly what all goes into that. And then often when these defense tech or other companies win these grants, it's a very narrow use case of what you can use those dollars for. So we love seeing it because it doesn't dilute the business, but we also take it with a grain of salt because you can often only use it for a very defined use case of what you're doing in the business. We want to make sure that aligns with the commercial goal of what we're trying to fund. Does that make sense?
Hi, my name is Francisco Valle. Thank you for sharing with us. We appreciate it. I'm part of a medtech company, and some of your comments had triggered questions to me. We already spent almost $2 million on doing all the animal studies and all the bench studies, right? At USC, for instance, and in Turkey, and everything is positive. The animals survive, Not only, we develop columns to separate based on molecular weight and charge of the atom molecule, right? Fentanyl. And we are the only one, we think, in the world doing that right now. So the question is now, right? What can we do to go to the next step? The FDA wants us to go to the next step. They say we may only have to do 50 to 90 individuals. And not only that, but they think they can be a novel, product. So what can we do in this case? Because we don't have the $8 million it takes to do the whole thing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fairly specific question, so I'm not sure how I can directly address it in the best way possible here. I'm happy to talk with you afterwards. I would just say, like, just focusing on what the real unmet problem is, and then how you're going to hit those milestones and how much capital is needed. But let's talk about that after. Thanks.
So let me just, we're going to get to the questions out there. I just have a question for you. The famous venture capitalist John Doerr from Kleiner Perkins was asked a question at a conference, and he said, is the key to being a great investor just being a bit dispassionate so you can be very clinical and steadfast and make decisions very rationally? He said, quite the opposite. It's about falling deeply and madly in love with your startups, and then when they don't work out well and you get your heart broken, learning how to get over it, like many things. So I'd like to ask you, when have you had your heart broken, and is there a story about a deal that you thought was so good or such a phenomenal opportunity and it just didn't work out despite what you were able to do? I can see Johnson kind of thinking about that. Have you had your heart broken, or have you just been lucky?
Sometimes I've had my heart broken for timing reasons, and I'll try to keep this anonymized so as not to, we had one company that absolutely took off like a rocket ship during COVID and had a number of acquisition offers. And I think in many ways, I've had my heart broken more on offers we didn't take, and then the ultimate terminal velocity of the business versus things that we bet on early that didn't work out. And so I think, maybe stating the obvious, but timing really matters. And I think it's easy to fall in love with these businesses and think that in one case, $150 million from Microsoft is not a good offer. And in another case, a $3.5 billion offer from a publicly traded healthcare company is not a good offer. And to see both those businesses, one still operating, but at much lower kind of terminal velocity, and the other got acquired for a third of the Microsoft offer, a year and a half later. Definitely had my heart broken in those scenarios. And then the other is, when you see a burning problem in the world, you got to be careful. Like, you bring your own biases to these things. And when you see a problem in the world, you look really hard to find it. And I have pattern matched and found things that I thought were broken in the world. And it turns out like most of the world maybe doesn't care about that, or at least not in a commercial sense. So you fund it, it's more of a project, it doesn't really take off, and then you sort of question, like, was I wrong? Does the market just not get it? Were we too early? So there's some like introspection after that when you have your heart broken.
My heart has been broken multiple times, I would say. I don't know if I'm getting any better at it. But there was a company that was first to market. They had plenty of first mover advantage, and the CEO ended up not taking the feedback that was available to him at the board level. Despite repeated attempts to guide him in a different direction. And it's something that it's actually the one investment that I felt the strongest about in terms of both the clinical potential and their first mover advantage. And that did not come to fruition in the way that we had hoped it to come. And as you can see, maybe I'm still mourning my loss there. So.
Yeah, I have a number of deals that broke my heart. But I think one in particular, we had a deal that was all but signed. So, the full, term sheets. And if you don't know this already, it takes months and months and months, sometimes, years to get the definitive agreements, get everything negotiated, get everything all but signed. So for one of the companies I invested in, we had this situation. It was going to be a nice multiple for everybody. But the lead investor on it wanted to see, a higher return. And have to be careful what I say here, but they had another company that they were friendly with that was going to go public, supposedly. And so we ended up, the company, they were going to sell basically and partner to the company that was going to IPO, even though there was a really good offer on the table from like a multi-billion-dollar company. And so the company had to walk away from the offer at hand that was not signed to go with the other party. And then the other party ended up having failed clinical data and the company went bankrupt. And then that company went back to the other strategic and they would not take the deal. So that broke my heart.
I have two examples, and I want all of your hearts to break for me. So I'm going to give you two examples. The first, at a prior firm, we had backed a founder named Jamie Siminoff. I don't know if anybody knows the name, but he had started a business called Unsubscribe. And before you could one-click unsubscribe from email, you could actually pay for a service that would unsubscribe you from emails. So we backed Jamie's company called Unsubscribe. Gmail released their product. Unsurprisingly, there wasn't a lot of demand for the unsubscribe service anymore. Jamie fought really hard for like 12 months to get a sale and got us most of our money back. He could have just walked away and been like, this battle is over, but he sort of stuck it out and got the sale. He came back around. He started a little skunk lab called Edison Jr. And he came back and said, hey guys, I got this idea for a video doorbell called Doorbot. You guys want to invest? And we went to investment committee, but ultimately it was like Wi-Fi latency wasn't very good, battery life wasn't good, it's hard to manufacture hardware that's watertight. Like there were all these reasons not to do the deal, even though we fundamentally knew the guy and loved him. So we ended up saying no to Doorbot, eventually rebranded as Ring Doorbell, bought Ring.com, went on Shark Tank, ultimately sold for $800 million to Amazon, has been a rocket ship ride inside of Amazon. So we don't get all these right, but my heart was broken there. Second, we looked at a business called Paribus. A venture partner and friends of mine had gone to undergrad with this guy named Kareem. Started a business called Paribus. It was post-transaction. It would basically audit post-transactions on Amazon because they had a terms of service where for 30 days, if the price lowered, you could petition Amazon and get the money back, right? It was a feature, not really a business. Ultimately, Capital One bought it for like $30 million. The problem with saying no to Kareem in that business is Kareem went on then to start a business called Ramp, and he invited everyone who backed Paribus to come into Ramp, and Ramp is now valued at $35 billion, had a ton of funding, a ton of liquidity. So my heart's been broken for not saying yes to Paribus when could have been Ramp. No.
A big part of this is some people look up to investors and think that we've got perfect vision, and we just want to tell you it's quite the opposite. There's a saying that's always better to be lucky than smart. And very often any investor who has really made it big, who does not account for timing and luck in their business, is completely full of BS to you. When we first heard the pitch for Airbnb, because I'm older, I thought it was one of the silliest ideas, because I could not possibly fathom the idea of inviting a stranger into your house and letting him, at that time, sleep on a couch or sleeping. I just thought for sure I'd be murdered in my sleep, and it just didn't make any sense. So it was a head scratcher, and then you see this company that, of course, is one of the most important, tech startups of that era get out. So don't think that we're as smart as we are. Don't place any kind of undue, genius on us, please.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. I'm from San Diego. I'm first-time CEO, Igor Nasonkin, Phythera Therapeutics. We're developing phytopharmaceutical drugs for oncology market, phytopharmaceuticals. Basically, we extract from nature. We're leveraging something that already works in nature, making it better, and developing RX oncology drugs. We used to be based in the Bay Area, but now we're actually transitioning to Irvine area where I live. So my question, question is pivoting and hitting a brick wall. First-time CEO, I raised pretty successfully $340,000 in the past 3 years, and last year was really not great. And we're seeking for a path forward. And the question about pivoting, but actually it was very encouraging to hear that you had over 100 meetings. I think we're getting closer to that. So when you say pivot, how close to the original idea you think one should pivot? Because I think our ideas are pretty good. And second is, do you think that nowadays when everything is nobody has money, many investors don't have money, at least what I see, co-development option is not a bad idea, because we had a bunch of offers to do co-development from CRO companies, and we had argument, kind of discussion in the company. We're not sure, because CROs have money, they have some cash flow, we have ideas, we have IP. So do you think this could be considered a pivot? Is it smart or it's not?
So I'll take the second one. So Nick and I both have a lot of partnership, co-development, early research collaboration experience on both sides of the table. And I'm a big fan for everybody in the room who isn't looking at least considering some type of early partnership with a company, with a pharma. It's a lot more common in biotech for these really nice early kind of seed stage partnerships. And I think they're phenomenal for the founders and phenomenal for when you can find that right match, right? They're not easy to do, but if you can find the right match, that's great. And it's kind of tangential, but also with companies, there's a number of pharma companies in Asia, right, that are looking to get into US markets. So to the extent too, you can do some interesting deal structures. That's a whole nother topic with them. So to answer your question, I would look into all different types of co-development opportunities, research collaborations. For those of you that don't know it, you can also have fully non-diluted research collaborations. So at J&J, or I should say pharma companies in general, it's not uncommon where here's $1 million to run a study, and we want the first right to review the data. And so it's a very light ask for $1 million, right? So just get creative, look into that, talk to companies early. So the other thing in terms of your question on how many times you should be kind of pivoting to get the, okay. So I would go back to, what is the actual, where's the hiccup, right? Like what are you actually solving, and kind of where's the hiccup? And I think that will define like the number of pivots, and also depending on your solution, right? If it's a therapeutic or a gene therapy, or that's going to take a long time to pivot versus something that's maybe software. So you have to be thoughtful about how quickly you actually can pivot.
Hi, Sienna Johnston from Calculate. This is for anybody, but first of all, John, you look just like Novak Djokovic, so. But I'm curious how you all differentiate yourselves from all the other VCs and funds out there.
I don't have a wicked serve or forehand, so I'm not Novak. Sorry to burst anybody's bubble. So I think a lot about this because we started our firm to try to differentiate from the number of early stage tech firms that were out there when we started. And when we started the firm, I sort of asked myself, who would I want to take money from if I was starting a business today? And the answer I came up with at the early stage is I want a roster of people in my corner who could help with go-to-market, finding early clients, sourcing talent, critical challenges facing the business, strategy. And so what we did at the time is we focused on sort of our set of successful peers that had founded interesting companies that were in sort of decision-making roles at the Fortune 2000. And so we built kind of the first scaled, we called them venture partners. We built the first scaled venture partner network. And it started with like 50 of our close peers with a broad set of skills and connections and relationships. And we grew by referral only to over 1,000 venture partners today. And so when we go look at a company, we spin up a real-time diligence committee with people who have a lot of industry insight and expertise. And I found that we say no a lot more than we say yes, but founders walk away and say, man, I'm going to refer my friend to you because that was so awesome. I got to meet 6 prospective customers, or I got, insight from prospective buyers that I didn't get from other VC firms, or there's a lot of great firms out there. We all have a different shtick, but I find a lot of VCs will say, hey, we'll help once we write the check. Like, let us invest in your business and we'll open up this massive Rolodex to you. We sort of flipped it on its head and said, we'll open up this massive Rolodex to you. And if we get great feedback, we'll invest. And so that's been our differentiation. And I think it's worked pretty well to our advantage.
Yeah, I think that's a great differentiation point. And to be able to leverage a network like that, right, I think is so important. So I think Nick and I look at it in terms of utilizing the network for deal flow, right? So proprietary deal flow. And it's so critical that you see access to the best deals before anybody else does, or have your pulse on who is going to start the company before they start the company. And I think, having having experience in the field as we do, I think that that's really critical, having a very strong network with exited entrepreneurs. And, clearly with our partnership too with UCSD and the MedTech Accelerator, and really getting to know the founders of these companies, before they actually form the companies or when they're forming the companies, I think that's really valuable. And I think that's actually a differentiator for us. And Nick and I have a lot of operating experience too that I think is absolutely critical to helping our companies succeed. I think that we can bring that to the table, so that really is a differentiator. And the other thing too is to bring in venture capitalists early, right? So having done deals with a number of different VCs in the Bay Area and other places, being able to bring those VCs in early to look at the deals and help de-risk the opportunities, and then know that we can have potential follow-on, that's really necessary in order to be successful.
We're going to ask a question in just a second, but I wanted to shout out, because you've heard us talk about the MedTech Accelerator. Several of these companies are MedTech programs, that companies that have gone through it. I wanted to call out attention to Becky Deller, who runs the MedTech Accelerator there, just so you know she is. Why don't you stand up just so they know? So if you're considering starting a MedTech company, talk to Becky, and she can guide you to the right place.
Hi, Kabir Gambir, co-founder of Halani Innovations, developing a solution for chronic back pain. This is a question regarding your MedTech fundraising experience, more or less open-ended. You had spoken about running through walls, running through brick walls. Do you feel your salesmanship, your pitch shifted by the time you got to that 140th person, such that you could have gone now to the first and then they would have invested? Or do you think it was more or less you aligning yourselves appropriately with the right investment group, or some combination? I'd love to hear your experience and thoughts on that.
Sorry, this is just very timely, because I was talking to a founder last Friday, and he said, man, I really need to space out my pitches, because I don't have enough time to make real-time feedback when I do all these pitches back to back to back to back to back to back, right? And so his approach has been, start with kind of, this may not doing a service to VCs, but start with like tier 2 or tier 3. Like we sort of think about there's tier 1, there's tier 2. So he's going to start his pitch and process with kind of tier 2, tier 3. He doesn't want to burn the bridge with his like most preferred venture funds, and run sort of a process doing that and getting feedback. He then takes that feedback, adjusts his pitch, and approaches the next group, and then sort of saves the best pitch after he's made iterations for his tier 1 VCs. And does that all over the process of sort of 9 weeks, like a week of outreach, a week of meetings, a week of feedback, a week of outreach, meetings, feedback. And so he iterates in sort of real time, but the first time he went to fundraise, he ran them all back to back. There was no discretion, tier 1, tier 3, tier 2, favorite, least favorite. And he's like, I gave the same pitch to everybody, and I got the same like glazed over look every time. And I didn't have the sort of space and time to sort of pivot and make those adjustments. So that's just some tactical feedback.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I should have used that strategy. I think it's asking the right questions, right, many times when you're in the meetings with the VCs, and to also ask, what areas that they're actually interested and excited about, and making sure that they're actively writing checks, right, is another thing. And I think that doing your homework ahead of time is, so what I learned is to do my homework, earlier, really understand who I was talking to. And for that company that I'm talking about in particular out of UCSD, there was a small subsection across medical investors that would actually invest in that area. So it sounds obvious, but at the time it wasn't that clear of like, how to target it. And once I figured that out, then I could find the right family offices, which ended up writing the first check on that.
Stating the obvious, like what I see a lot of founders not do, you gotta ask for the order, right? Like, what are next steps? Based on what you heard today, what would you envision are follow-up steps, right? Given your investment in this company, do you think we're too close to that? Or, why were you interested in taking the pitch with us? Like, it sounds obvious, but a lot of founders will get to the end of the call and they'll be like, okay, great, thanks for your time. and it's over, and there's no next best action. There's no when are we connecting again? Is there more information you'd like to see? And I'd like to think when we see stuff we like, we're going to make it happen. But there's a lot of flow. There's a lot of current. And if there's not follow up or not sort of anticipated next steps, it can get lost in the shuffle.
Great feedback. Yep.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alvaro Montaño. I'm a student here at UCSD Rady, having a great time. And I also just joined as a board member for a rising startup. So right now, actually, in 2 weeks, we're going to go over to San Francisco to do our first pitch, trying to raise $1 million. It's going to be fun. And I wanted to ask you guys, what would be some good pointers that you guys would share with me so that I can share with my founder? She's relentless. About what to do, what to say, or what are some like good ideas, right, to get her mindset right, or support her in everything that she needs. Or if the question's easier, what would be some good pointers for you guys, for me, and as a first-time board member to like support this company as it grows?
Well, Greg spoke about storytelling. And I think telling the story is so key, because an investor will hear so many pitches a day, right? And what sticks, later that day or even the next day, it's really something emotional. It's some kind of connection. I think many times it's something that they can, share with a friend, right? Get excited about. So I would, you can look into, there's different ways that you can do good storytelling and improve on that. But I think if there's a way that you can really incorporate whatever the product is, whatever the market is, if it's something personal that's affected you, or something that you can get me really caring about, or other investors, then that can make a difference.
Just yes to the storytelling. And then the other thing at a high level, I think, is making it a conversation, right? So if they ask a question, the idea is not to like answer and get on to your next point. The goal is to answer the question, but then also see what's behind the question. Try to understand, what bad experience they've had or what good experience they've had, and develop a dialogue so that at the end of the pitch, you haven't really gone through slide by slide with all your talking points. You've had more of an organic discussion around the opportunity.
So first of all, a question: why are you going to San Francisco first when you're in San Diego? No, but it's I think to the point here, it's your fundraising deck is like a roadmap. I see a lot of founders get it, and it's like slide 1, slide 2, slide 3, and the point is not to like tick through it and get through it. It's a backdrop if there's a lull in conversation, if investors want to jump to something. So use it as such. Fundraising is a long game, so like don't get too low coming out of a bad meeting. Don't get too high coming out of a good meeting. Like, it's a long game. It's not going to click on the first time, most likely. So take it as such. And then 3, it's so easy in this day and age with generative AI tools to come in better prepared. You can scrape LinkedIn profiles. You can ask for college affiliations. You can and make it human. And it's so much better received when you show up and have done your homework. I saw you invested in this company, which is why we thought it'd be a good fit to meet you. Or you went to this undergrad, so did my co-founder, go Hawkeyes, or, go whatever it is. And so I think just like make it human. A lot of people view it like an exercise. I got to get through this. I got to get through my deck. I got to fundraise. I got to ask these questions. Make it a conversation. Everyone's going to go a different way. It's a bit of like choose your own adventure, and like let that happen. Don't try to stick to a script.
The other thing I'll say when you actually do pitch, too many entrepreneurs make the mistake of making themselves the entire center of what happened. Your customer is at the center of that, the person you're solving it. You have to explain how it is in their best interest to be working with you. And if it's the investor, what role, if you're telling a story like a script, what role does that customer play in that script? And how are you basically solving that problem for them? And I see too many entrepreneurs going, look how elegant our solution is. Look how wonderful we are. Look at how much money we're going to make. But ultimately, it's how do you really solve a customer's problem to where they may not just buy it once, they'll buy it over and over again, and they will give you their loyalty, not just their business, to do it. And if we can see people demonstrate that connection, that's really, really important. And very few entrepreneurs really achieve that.
Hi, I'm Tom, co-founder, CEO of Oxylo, MedTech Accelerator alum as well, and we're developing novel treatments for liver cancer by unlocking chemos from the inside out. So one thing that we as founders don't really see at all are the LPs. And you guys raising a fund, 4 months, really impressive. I'm just wondering, like, what's the LP sentiment these days? Is there any push to try and get exits faster? Is this changing how VCs are investing themselves? Just curious.
That's not just at this time. That's always. There's a lot of LP money tied up right now. I think it's over $170 billion or so that has not been returned yet. And, I think Greg probably knows the numbers better than I do, but it is not a great time for funds being returned. And so, as you can imagine, if the LPs aren't getting their money back, well, they're not reinvesting into the new funds, and then on the entrepreneurs feel that. We all feel that. So, that's kind of where the situation is right now. I do think I think it's an interesting time. I can speak to for MedTech venture capital. It was actually $10 billion in MedTech venture capital this year. Last year was $7.5 billion. So it's actually increased, which is great to see. And I'm optimistic that that will continue, but I'm hoping with some of their tech IPOs, but it's going to be really important for the LPs, I think, to get their money back in order for their, for more funds like ours to start, or even bigger funds to continue to raise larger funds.
At least on the tech side, I'm going to butcher the numbers, but something like 60% of capital that was raised last year on the tech venture side went to 3 firms, Andreessen Horowitz, General Catalyst, and Insight. I think someone can fact check me on that. But there is a paradigm shift in like early stage venture, and a lot of dollars are accreting to the mega platforms. And what I would tell you is do your homework. There's a lot of zombie funds roaming around out there. I think OpenLP just did a study, and up to 40% of early stage funds are zombies, meaning they're still taking meetings, but they don't have capital. And so, if you have access to resources like PitchBook or Preqin, see when the last deal they completed was, look at their portfolio and go see if you can just Google search and figure out, like, are they still active in market? Ask them if you're on a meeting with them. But the last thing you want to do is sort of waste your time with people that can't write checks. But the LP sentiment right now is not great. I think it got really dark in like maybe late 22, early 23, and this whole AI wave has given people a lot of hope. Again, I sit in a unique seat where there's a lot of demand from LPs for 10 or 15 names that are the names you would know. SpaceX, Anduril, OpenAI, Anthropic, Neuralink, a few others. And I think there's a lot of people hoping that liquidity comes in the form of IPOs in the next couple of quarters. And if it does, I hope that gets recycled back into the market. But right now, there's not a lot of commitments going out from non-major institutional investors.
At the early stage, one of the real secrets of the Silicon Valley from the capital side has been some of the early capital base has been from these mafias, these companies that have these tremendous exits, and then these people recycle a lot of their, not only their money, but their time and their talent, their connections back into it. And we see that happen. That said, 2/3 of all venture funds are never able to return capital back to their investors. It's what we call in the industry a power law. Some people call it a Pareto, which is it's really a few small number of funds that are responsible for the net numbers, of returns back in the market. So a lot of that capital is chasing those people because there's this serial persistence in their funds. That said, as I said, at the early stage, we fund these things, but then we expect when the companies get to a certain stage that there's someone on the other side, like a marathon, who will take that baton and be able to fund these things. And so we're hopeful, and of course, the work that we're doing here at UCSD and that Deb is helping us lead is that we're trying to make San Diego more of a place where a lot of that capital comes. We certainly like it to be residential here, but we're fine for any capital, and we're very grateful for all capital that kind of goes in our company. So it's not only that we're trying to build the platforms locally here, but we're also trying to help the entrepreneurship create connections to the investors up there. In fact, once a quarter, we take a number of founders from here up to the Valley and make a lot of those connections. So we're going to continue to do that. I think we may have time for one more question, but then we'll allow you to kind of network and come up and chat a bit, but we want to kind of leave some space for that. Did you have the final? There she is.
Yeah. My name is Aditi. I'm an undergraduate student, double majoring in nanoengineering and math CS with a minor in bio. And I've seen you guys kind of touched on this, but you guys do mention that some people are building so that they can get money, some people want money so that they can build. I have a lot of ideas, and it's hard to get money to build things as an undergraduate student. So if I have I've got a lot of ideas, but my question to you is, if I have an idea, how can I prove it to you that it's worth investing in?
Very basic question.
I have some thoughts, but
There you go.
So I think it's one thing to prove to us. I think what's important is to show that there's market demand for what you're building, right? And that can come, it can come from something as basic as a Google form you create and survey prospective customers, right? It can come in the form of like an LOI or an IOI from a prospective customer. The best thing is orders, but often you have to build before the revenue comes. But I sort of challenge people with these cheap experiments, like for $50, what can you test to see if there's demand? And if you get positive signal, can you spend $500 and test if there's demand? And then can you spend $1,000? And so it's not nothing, but before you raise real dollars, can you tap, your checking account? Can you tap friends and family for those first couple of inexpensive experiments to see if there is demand for what you're building? The other thing I'll say, and this is not in any way to discourage you, but one of the founders we backed had put a nice LinkedIn post out there. He said he graduated undergrad. He had an offer from Meta, but he wanted to go start a company. And he talked to a mentor, and essentially the feedback was, go work for Meta for a few years because you probably think you know what problems are out there. But until you actually work in an environment with scale and things breaking and working with other really smart engineers trying to solve problems, you're not going to know sort of the types of problems you could solve without seeing them out in the wild. I know a lot of founders that have been successful right out of undergrad, so it's not to discourage that. But I have seen a lot of founders who come in with ideas and then they go get some more like real world work experience and come back and solving a whole different like order of magnitude difficulty problems. And those tend to be more interesting on average to us from like a tech perspective. Does that make sense?
So that's actually a good way to kind of wrap this conversation up. And what we say with these conversations is we want them to be the start of these dialogues rather than the end. So hopefully you'll connect with other people and continue these on, but also come to us. And there's a number of programs that UCSD does across the campus, including educational and pragmatic programs within engineering and the MedTech Accelerator. We have programs here within OIC and within Rady and other parts of the campus. They're specifically there to kind of help you get the answers to those kinds of questions. Like, what is enough for your particular thing, and how do I know when I'm prepared enough to actually begin talking to people? And so take advantage of those. Again, innovation.ucsd.edu kind of lays out these maps across campus that look like these subway maps of how to connect to all this stuff. In the simplest thing, what we say is that a business model, basically a good business opportunity, must satisfy 3 fundamental conditions. The first one is, you can call it proof of concept, but it's really the feasibility side. Show us that what you're doing is actually doable. The second one is proof of relevance, that there's actually a customer on the other side for this, and you actually have to demonstrate that and actually bring us information to show that. And the third is proof of life, because it's not just about the value you create, it's about the value we're going to capture back from the market, and that differential is what we look at as the business opportunity. And so when all 3 of those things come together in this kind of very nice alchemy, you have something that's at least potentially interesting from an investment side for us to be able to pull through to the market. So thank you all for kind of sticking it out with us. Oh,
yeah, can I just say
absolutely.
Yeah. So as you know, we are a new venture capital firm here, and I just really wanted to thank Greg in particular in the Office of Innovation and Commercialization. Greg, we've known each other for a real long time as a mentor, friend, and here we are now, we're working together. So it's just really something else to be doing this. I also just want to thank UCSD as a whole, because our firm has partnered with UCSD, which we're so thrilled about.
And we're excited about it.
And I also wanted to thank Al Pisano, the Dean of Engineering, is not here tonight, but he's played an instrument role in the Jacobs School and all of this, as well as the IGE and the MedTech Accelerator and Becky Deller. who we named earlier tonight. So I just want to express my gratitude to the campus and for being here.
Very grateful. Thank you so much. Thank you for being part of this conversation. Thanks for caring enough to kind of explore entrepreneurship. We're here for you. Please join me in thanking the speakers, and hopefully you're going to get a chance to talk to them. Thank you so much.